Part II, Chapter 12 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 12. The Writers of the Times. The classic masters of Greek and Roman thought were at no time entirely forgotten. It is a peculiarity of the age that all the temporal rulers, beginning with Charlemagne, though often profoundly ignorant, were never wholly forgetful of the debt of their people to the creators of literature. Now and then even a barbaric ruler surrounded himself with scholars, who not only reflected their learned light on the court, but were of influence in promoting a thirst for knowledge throughout the dominions. The example of the Goth Ulfilas, one of the most thorough scholars of his day, was powerful over rulers and the scholars of their courts in the later times. Scholars before Charlemagne were numerous, and yet, because of the general distractions of the times, were not of wide influence. The most learned men were servants of the Church, and hence science was confined chiefly to theology. Boethius and Cassiodorus, who furnished under the patronage of the Ostrogothic court, contributed largely to the preservation of both the classic and the patristic writings. The monasteries of Scotland and Ireland produced many scholars, whose fame went into all lands. The communication between those countries and Rome was frequent, and many treasures were taken back to them from Italy, which proved of great value for the study of the Greek and Roman writers, and of the Fathers as well, for many centuries. Theodore of Tarsus, the Venerable Bede, and the scholar Hadrian were at the head of Anglo-Saxon learning. The most powerful promoter of learning in Britain was Alfred the Great. The War of Races had done much to destroy all taste for scholarship. The ravages of the Scandinavian piratical tribes made the land a waste. But that wise king restored science to its former elevated position. His own example was a model of literary aspiration. He founded monasteries, churches, and schools, and built the school which afterwards grew into the University of Oxford. He invited learned men into the country, and he himself translated, though very freely, the works of Boethius and Orosius, made a paraphrase of Bede's Ecclesiastical History, and translated and circulated among his clergy Gregory's book on Pastoral Care. The scholars of Charlemagne's court constituted a bright galaxy of masters in literature. The emperor was constantly in search of learned men. He did not care where they came from or what their opinions were. The brightest ornament of his reign was Alcuin, an Anglo-Saxon. While this man was on a journey to Rome, he was introduced to Charlemagne. This was in 781, and down to his death in 804, Charlemagne would not permit the calm and learned scholar to leave his service. He commanded Alcuin to superintend all the educational movements of his broad dominions. He sent him on important diplomatic missions, and found that he could trust him in the most delicate duties. In 796 he gave him the abbacy of Tours, which became, through Alcuin, a celebrated seat of learning. Paul Diaconus was of Lombard origin. He had been a member of the court of the Lombard king Desiderius. Yet Charlemagne, after subjugating the Lombards, won him to his service. But the scholar was ill at ease. The loss of his country was a sorrow which he could not overcome, and, after getting released, he withdrew to his former monastery, Monte Cassino, and died there. It is from Paul Diaconus's poem on John the Baptist that Guido of Arezzo derived his names for the musical notes. Ut queant laxis, re sonare fibris, mi ra gestorum, fa mulituorum, sol ve pollutum, labri reatum, Sancte Johannes. Laedrad of Leon, Theodulf of Orleans, and Paulinus of Aquileia were also bright lights of Charlemagne's court. End of chapter 12.